Hello friends, my name is Marines, and today I'll be talking about the next batch of my most recent reads. I am back from vacation. It's been about a week since I got back from out of the country, and I was thinking about putting together my thoughts on the whole experience, on all of my travel and what I saw and what I did together somehow in a video, or I don't know how, but that is an idea that I've been toying with. But usually when I say that, it just happens that I never manage to get myself together, and then the whole moment passes. So we will see if I can manage to put something together. But I had a wonderful time and I'm happy to be home. I started a new job. Things are crazy as they've been all year long, but I am happy to be home, and I'm very happy to start filming again and watching videos and getting back into the community, so let's go ahead and do that. Book 28 for the year was The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. I gave this installment 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think that what Stiefvater does, she does so completely. She commits to the bit, if you will. In this book, it was a struggle for me between when those things worked and when they didn't. We get such a strong sense of who these characters are, and when that is working, it makes you feel so connected to them and to their personalities. When it isn't working, it starts to feel repetitive, and in that repetition you just almost get the feeling that there isn't a lot of character development. Whether that's true or not, it's just the repetition that makes you feel like the characters are stalling. The same kind of thing applies to her writing. It is unique and strange and haunting. At the best of times, it creates this slow and heavy southern tinge supernatural atmosphere. At the worst of times, it becomes too trippy and too convenient, which was especially true in this book for me for the resolution. This kind of back and forth is what landed me in a 3.5 star rating for the book. I did enjoy reading it, and I think it gave me a better understanding of some of the characters that I didn't immediately feel sympathetic towards. Book 29 was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, which I also gave 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm sure that if you've heard about this book, you've heard it described as a heist story, which that description I think is such a disservice to what you actually get in this book. The story is less about the heist and more about the people who get together to pull off the heist. During the story, Bardugo pauses her endgame storytelling in order to give backstory on the major players and to have them reflect and interact with each other, which is perfectly fine and a valid choice, but just as I said, in my own head, in my expectation, I was expecting something a little quicker, and I thought that that endgame would stand out more than it did against the story of the characters, which slowed down the entire thing so much. It was very much about the characters, and I just wasn't sure if I cared enough about the characters to make this a 4 or 5 star read in my eyes. I was sold on them pretty early on, and I was shipping people like really early on, which is very strange for me because I'm not a shipper. I don't have a very shippy kind of heart, but in this story I just met these characters, and there were some of them that I had paired up already in my head, and that kind of, because it happened so early on, it almost became a detriment to the story for me, because that carries on through the entire story. The relationship angst that you get a whiff of right at the beginning of the story carries us through the entire thing. Again, like I said, I'm not naturally a shipper, so what I thought was really interesting that I was actually seeing those pairings and enjoying them so early on, then went on to push the limits of my patience as we heard about it again and again and again. That all said, the last half of the book is a great improvement over the first half of the book, so if you're reading it and you're not very much into it, you think that the beginning is slow, I was there, and if you're the type of person that can put a little patience into their reading, then the second half of the book does get better. I am the type of person that I'm not always up and willing for giving a story 100 pages or 200 pages in order for it to find its footing. So I actually gave up on this book the first time I tried to read it because it was taking too long. I came back to it when I was in a more patient reading mood, and I made it all the way through to the end, and like I said, my overall experience was an enjoyable one. The dialogue in this book is just so fantastic. Even though I didn't care so much about the characters individually, I did enjoy their group dynamics. I love stories where each person kind of has a specialized role within a group. One of my favorite TV shows of all time is Firefly, and this had such a Firefly-esque feeling to it because of that, because it is kind of this mismatched group, a found family, and each person has their specialized role. I love those kinds of stories. I'm getting excited just talking about those kinds of stories, and this definitely had that element in it. And Edge was my favorite character, which made the ending particularly interesting for me me. And it also makes it interesting because Kaz is my least favorite character. I don't dislike him. I think he's a pretty good character. It's just that I am not partial to the like douchebag who's broken inside, and that's what Kaz's whole deal is. I don't think that it was done in a bad way in this story, but again, that's just a trope that is hard for me to really enjoy in the best of circumstances. So Kaz is my least favorite by comparison. I found more worthy things in the rest of the characters, but he just was starting kind of in a negative balance anyway because I don't like that trope. So yes, wrapping it all up, it was a tough read for me to get into, but I am very happy that I finished my way through it. It took me several trials, but I did it, and I did find a lot to enjoy there, and I've already pre-ordered book 2. So I am going to keep reading. I didn't think it was perfect. I'm not really sure that it met the level of hype that it was getting in my eyes, but I get why people liked it, and I enjoyed it. Book number 30 was Do Not Disturb by A.R. Torre. This is the second book in the Deanna Madden series, and I rated this 2.5 out of 5 stars, and I wish I had written down some notes as to why. Though perhaps the most telling thing about this book that I can say is that I am just drawing a blank as to exactly what happened in the story. This is an erotic thriller series about a woman who wants to murder people, so she locks herself up in her own apartment and she makes money by being a cam girl. I thought that the first book was compulsively readable, and the premise was unique enough that it really brought you through the story that has just kind of so-so writing and plotting. It was a little bit trashy and not in a particularly skillful way, but as I said, it was compulsively readable. And whatever faults the first book had, the second book had them even more. I feel that that was compounded by the fact that in the second book we get the point of view of a man who is coming after our main character, and he wants to brutalize her and rape her, and we read his thoughts about how he wants to do these things and how he's done them in the past to other women. It was purposefully uncomfortable, but then it hit a point for me where it became gratuitously so. It was no longer adding anything to the plot besides shock factor. We knew that this man was coming, we knew that he was awful, we knew what he wanted to do, and it just kept going in and out of every other chapter or so. We just got a piece of him talking about how much he wanted to rape our main character. And because one of the only things that the first book had going for it was that it was so readable and so quick, the fact that the second book slows you down with this kind of yucky, icky factor just did not bode well for the entire reading experience. Besides that, there was a lot of buildup of stuff, again, that I can't remember, for a resolution that was rather quick. She just figures her way out of it super quickly, and it's exactly what you expect it to be, knowing who she is. It plays out exactly like that, and I don't know, it just felt really cliche. I want to finish the series. There's a third book, mostly so I won't have another open series, even though the premise of the third book I really don't like. So I'm going to try and see if I can get through it quickly, but if not, I'll just call this one a wash and stop at book 2. Book number 31 was The Golden Compass, or The Northern Lights by Phillip Pullman. This was a reread for me and a solid 4.5 out of 5 stars because I love this story. 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I think that might be generous. It probably is like a 4 all said and done, but factoring in my love of this story, especially having the full series in my head and knowing how it ends, 4.5, because this contains some of my favorite characters of all time. I think during reread it was even more clear to me, however, that this story is very slow to start. It's very dull in the beginning, and I usually will not recommend books that are that way because, again, I don't think you should have to give a book 100 or 200 pages in order to get into it unless you are a particularly patient reader. And that's why I feel like this would be difficult for me to recommend, even though, as I said, I enjoy it so very much. I think that it takes about 100 pages in this book for kind of that dullness to change and for you to really get invested in the story and in the characters. At first, you're not really sure why you should care about Lyra or why he's telling you what he's telling you and the details that he's telling you. It's just kind of like, I don't know why I should care, or at least that's the feeling that I get, even loving the series. Like, I can see that, but that changes for me, particularly around the 100-page mark, where Lyra's story really just starts coming together and you see her resilience, her bravery, and you really start to get invested in her as a character. In this reread, I was paying a lot of attention to how much I loved Lyra and just kind of her little character quirks, and when I fell in love with her, and when I fell in love with her precocious nature. She is just such a well-written child character. She's got that bright-eyed nature to her, but she's also got these character faults that are just wonderful. Books number 32 to 34 were Sweet Tooth volumes 4, 5, and 6. I already did a full series review on this entire series 1 through 6, so I will link that for you guys up on the screen so you can check it out if you want to hear my thoughts. But in a nutshell, I really enjoyed this whole series. I highly recommend it. I read graphic novels and I enjoy them, but I never truly love them because it's hard for me to get into the short form, and I feel like a lot of times they're not fleshed out enough. The story is not fleshed out enough for me to truly enjoy, but that was not the case here. I felt that I got a full story with really great characters. It was something that made me think, and it was very visually interesting. That's it for me today. I'm still about 8 books behind my current reading, but I'm doing my best to kind of catch up, and there are other videos that I want to make as well before I get to talking about like the next batch of books that I read. So just, you know, keep hanging in there with me like you guys have been doing all year long. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon.